Good afternoon, everybody. Eric Foster, co-founder, well, I'm sorry, Eric Foster, board chairman of Cannas Capital Holdings, and also lead on the Cannas Capital Bank Black program. As you can see, the graphic behind me. I wanted to touch base today on something that I think is critical in the conversation with regards to the current times that we're living in and creating a foundation of economic sustainability, something that has been a historic challenge in this country, and something that for communities of color like African American, Indigenous, Native American, Arab American, Chaldean, Hispanic American, etc., is still a consistent challenge to this day. And I wanted to put it in a historical context because we've tried from a policy dynamic a number of activities and initiatives to try to address increasing economic opportunity, stability, and growth across different minority communities. Things such as the GI Bill of 1944, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Second Merrill Act of 1890, which created historically Black colleges and universities, the National Labor Relations Act and Fair Labor Standards Act in regards to workers' rights. The Executive Order 8802 prohibiting discrimination in the defense industry, Executive Order 9981 desegregating the armed forces, and then the executive order by President Kennedy first in 1961, Executive Order 10925, which included provision for government contractors to take affirmative action to ensure that applicants and employees were treated equally, regardless of race, creed, color, or national origin. And then eventually, with President Johnson, Executive Order 11246 and 11375, which extended that and went further in regards to religion, national origin, and also put forward guidelines for contracting and diversification in contracting. President Clinton had the Empowerment Act and the various activities that came from that to invest in underserved communities, communities that were predominantly majority non-white communities. We had President Nixon, even during his time. A lot of people say, well, Nixon had some things that were good. The Fair Housing Act. No, actually, Fair Housing Act was under LBJ, but the Minority Business Development Agency, that was a Nixon Act. The Equal Credit Opportunity Act, that was something that prohibited discrimination in credit based on race and other factors. That was under Nixon. While all of these activities have been really important and really good, there's been a challenge. And that challenge has been ensuring that once the policy was adopted and enacted, that the underlying work, the underlying foundation of how do you ensure implementation to address historic underfunding, undercapitalization, and under access to opportunity is realized and sustained so that the communities that you have put these acts forward to try to help are able to actually then take advantage and see 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 40 years down the road that the actual work is sustainable. that the overall economic conditions of these communities has greatly improved, where these communities are no longer challenged, but these communities are able to sustain themselves and create at least a baseline level of a working class. Not everybody, there's always going to be, unfortunately, there's always going to be some poor people. But if you have a sustainable foundation, you can create a structure and a system where people can actually have a long term platform where you can increase the number that are in the working class, you can increase the number that are in the middle class, you can increase the number that are in the upper middle class to lower upper income to extremely rich. And it then can sustain itself through cyclical action. Well, that has been one of the problems. We've had all of these policies that have passed that have been intentionally good and have done things. Oh, I forgot to add even the Community Reinvestment Act that was passed during President Carter's time in 1977 to get banking to have investment strategies to increase access to capital to individuals and small businesses and medium-sized and large businesses that were owned by non-white individuals. However, like I said, the fundamental economic challenges still exist to this day because there wasn't a continuing underpinning of activity to ensure that the implementation could create sustainable outcomes. Well, that's where my friend Simone Kasai comes in because Simone, being someone who has had a wealth of experience in a cross section of different industries, opportunities, and life experiences, she realized that if we're going to do something, and we're going to do something in any industry, be it an existing industry or in this instance, why the Bank Black initiative is initially focused on the cannabis industry, a newer industry that doesn't have a corporate overhang where the economy of scale is still viable for individuals to access, and they don't have to be ultra millionaires and billionaires, is to create a structure that if you're going to create the opportunity, there is the underpinning that can support the sustainability and growth of the businesses, the employees, and the contractors and the communities where these businesses operate in. And so that's what gave her the inspiration, which I have to say, God gives us the inspiration and we have to act upon it. He doesn't just tell us, I'm going to do all the work for you. He gives us where we need to go, but we have to do the actual work. And that's where she developed the Bank Black program. The whole piece about the Bank Black program, which really gets into how do we create something sustainable, is first, you got to reassess credit worthiness. Go back to the Fair Credit Act under Nixon. You got to reassess what does it look like to say that we are addressing credit and giving opportunities for people to get credit. I'm sorry, it was the Equal Credit Opportunity Act. Well, credit worthiness for people from communities of color, from the African American community to the Indigenous American community and others, is not going to be the same for white communities. That's just a structural reality. So you have to expand the landscape. And that's what, as an underpinning with Simone's experience in finance and insurance, developed what the underwriting piece is. How do you create a socioeconomically sensitive and structured underwriting approach that takes into consideration factors that normally don't fit into a traditional bank's underwriting criteria that can increase the capital access? In a sense, how do you actually take the Community Reinvestment Act and the Equal Credit Opportunity Act and turn them into something that is sustainable and adaptable to the real world and what's happening today? Don't build a 1969 Plymouth Valiant, which was a car that my grandma Foster had, in 2025. Don't do it because nobody's going to buy it. If you haven't updated the car since 1969 and you're still trying to sell it today in 2025, it's not going to work. So that's one of the first things. Bank Black, how do we create an underwriting lending criteria that can include the real world conditions that people of color, communities of color, business people of color are experiencing today, and take all of those myriad factors into consideration to determine if this risk of lending makes sense? Then, how do we wed that together with either states who are trying to support in this new industry that doesn't have a corporatization dominated model within it, but those states like a Maryland or Illinois or Connecticut or a Virginia, if Virginia elects the right governor, are trying to actually, and keeps the House in control of the pro cannabis majority, you create support. Or separately, what we're doing in Bank Black, we're reaching out to impact funds, social equity, well, not social capital investment entities, philanthropic, other stakeholders that are in the foundation and investment areas from a philanthropic dynamic that are trying to see growth of economic stability and sustainability in diverse communities, to pull in the resources to support and buttress what the lending can be. Because you create the underwriting criteria, then you create a structure that can mirror to support either from the philanthropic and foundation community or impact investment community or state backed support, similar to like what the SBA does at a federal level, but it's state based for the cannabis industry, to induce the participation of financial institutions to be a part of the lending approach. And then lastly, how do you tie in the underpinnings of continuing education support, such as how do you help continue to grow the knowledge base and the operating capacity, the financial management capacity, and the sales and marketing capacity of these businesses? I wrote a white paper a few years ago based on my experience as a failed business owner. It was the three things that I needed to know to be a business owner and why I failed. And it was what I was missing in understanding the operational structure of running a business, the financial and fiscal side of running a business, and the sales and marketing side, which then I wrote a separate paper on, um, why you're not special in terms of understanding the dynamics of sales and moving consumers through the functionality and rationality of the purchasing process, and why you're not special because there's somebody else that's probably doing something similar to you and how you have to create separation in why people should buy you and not your competition, you know. So that's the other part. So in the Bank Black solution, it's all structured around creating a system that can let people in the door by assessing a broader scope of conditions that are applicable to the life and economic experience of people that come from the Black community, that come from the Indigenous, Native American community, the Hispanic community, et cetera, that can then have support from strategic partners, either at state government levels or from the impact investment fund community or from the philanthropic and foundation who looks at social economics, and then has a continuing structure of education and inputs to help grow that business and those businesses to become mid-market, the 20 million, 30 million, $40 million a year revenue businesses that can employ thousands of people that spend 10, 12 million perhaps on procurement of goods and services over the course of the year to fund their operations, which what are they doing by procuring? They're buying from other businesses, hopefully other businesses from the same communities that they come from. And consider right now that unfortunately we have a federal administration that seems focused on prioritization of white men as if white men have been left out of opportunities. We have to create a structure that is inclusive for everybody else. Because here's the real, when the African American community is doing well economically, it benefits white people. When the Indigenous American community is doing well, it benefits white people. When the Native American, when the Hispanic community is doing well economically, it benefits white people. If you, and I'm a demand side capitalist, I believe in demand side capitalist theory. I'm a big proponent of Hyman Minsky and his approach to economic policy and various papers that he wrote. Thomas Piketty, I'm probably mispronouncing it, but those are the types of folks that I study and follow from an economic vantage point. But demand side capitalism is where you infuse your inputs into the broader universe. I look at it as the four legs of the economic engine: consumer, education and nonprofit, government, and business. Those are the four legs of the table. You're putting your inputs into ensuring that the consumer has growth opportunity, education and nonprofit has the support it needs, government has the money to do the resources that it fits in, and then, of course, the business side benefits from all those other three and the demand activity that they have. The overall foundation of that is an approach that builds a foundation that is sustainable versus building from a top down. You know, Simone's like a sister from another mother. We didn't know each other until the past, I want to say 9 years, but the way that she thinks and the way that she structured this team, the back office team, the people who put together the support, this isn't a one person operation. This is a company that has grown over the years, that is a significant provider of services in the insurance sector, but is also making a mark here in this sector. And this program is now being considered from a social economic lending perspective by the ASTM, International Body for Standards and Compliance, where those policies are usually what helps roll out how do we measure quality? How do we measure compliance? How do we measure safety? How do we measure good manufacturing or good food standards? That organization is considering, it's going through the ballot process, the adoption of this model to be a standard for social capital lending, which is huge. But what she's put together with this team and then allowed me to be blessed to be the board chair is a structure that is sustainable. So what it does is, it gets past the good things that were done in the past, like the CRA, like the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, like the Minority Business Development Agency, like the Fair Housing, the Economic Opportunity Act of 64, the Morale Act, the Freedmen's Bureau, the Fair Labor Standards Act, and all of these other policies that have been done over the decades and centuries to try to open up doors for people that look like me and Simone and this team at Cannas Capital, but also look like hopefully you. This is, to use the Mandalorian term and Mandalore, this is the way. This is the way of how do we create a continuing foundation that can ensure that if we're trying to help grow the economics of people who aren't white, that those economics will grow in a positive way and that those stakeholders will be able to reinvest, expand the growth, which helps everybody, including the white community, both allies and non allies. If everybody is doing better economically and spending, it helps everybody, whether they like you or not, whether they wanted to see you succeed or not. And honestly, that's the main thing. You don't have to like it, but if it helps increase the spending and hiring and other positive economic activities so that you benefit from it too, well, God bless you. That's a good thing. And so I'm going to close in this one because I think it is important that what we need going forward, policy is an important step. We met with different state entities to try to get them on board to help with and embrace this. They're not there yet in terms of seeing how do you wed this in. But remember, the cannabis industry is new. It's basically a 4.5-year-old child in the overall industry sector of different business sectors. However, this also, by being so new, is a place where you can create those opportunities and those pathways because you don't have a AT&T, you don't have a General Motors, you don't have a Whirlpool, you don't have those entities that have such size and scale until it's almost impossible for new players to get into the market. Well, this is to take advantage of that time in this industry and create something that's sustainable so that we can get past adopting good policy that doesn't last in terms of the impacts. Some of the policies that I mentioned, you all may not have heard of. And while there's still law, most of them, the impact and what it was meant to do versus what it's doing today is not the same. And so we have to think differently, approach differently. And this Bank Black initiative, the Bank Black solution, is the way forward. This is the way. And fortunately, I don't have a Grogu who can help us talk to state and impact investment and others to try to move them along like Obi-Wan did in the New Hope. These aren't the droids that you're looking for, but this is the way. This is the way for creating something sustainable. Let's do this and be about this life, people. This is the way, and this is the path for how do we grow the economics for communities of color? How do we grow sustainability in the cannabis industry? And how do we create foundation that 50 years from now, we can sit back and say, we really did something that lasted. So thank you all. And I look forward to doing more and talking to you more because as a board chair, and I've always been an activist board leader, this is important to me to do and to be a part of. So thank you. Have a blessed day, and I'll talk to you on the other side.